Mira Solana had never believed in destiny. She believed in elderroot tinctures, in the particular smell of snow before it fell, and in the kind of silence that only existed at the top of a mountain when the wind held its breath. She believed in things she could touch, measure, and carry home in a basket. Fate was not something she kept in her cottage. So when the letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a rider in a dark green cloak with silver stitching at the collar, she read it twice and set it on the kitchen table beside her mother's tea. Her mother picked it up. She read it once. She set it back down very carefully, the way a person sets down something that might shatter. "It is from the Alpha King," her mother said. "I know," Mira said. "I read it. He says you are his fated mate." "I read that part too. The crown ceremony is at the next full moon." Mira poured herself more tea. "I heard you the first time, Mama." She had been at the winter solstice market in Voris when it happened. She had been behind her little table, arranging jars in a row by size, when the crowd shifted the way crowds shift when something large and important passes through. She had looked up. There he was, Aldrich Voren, Alpha King of 7 packs across 3 mountain ranges, standing 40 feet away with all the ease of a man who had never once been told no. He was tall. He was broad. He had the kind of jaw that painters liked and the kind of eyes that had seen too much cold weather. He was surrounded by guards who moved like shadows, and a sister who walked beside him with the expression of someone enduring an obligation. He had gone completely still when he saw Mira, just stopped in the middle of the market, as if someone had pulled a thread in the center of him. He crossed the space between them in 12 steps. His guards moved with him. The crowd made room. He introduced himself, all of his titles, in order. It took a moment. Mira looked at him for a long second. "Are you here for the joint pain or the sleeplessness?" she asked. "Because you look like a man who hasn't slept in about 3 years, and I have something good for that." The crowd went absolutely silent. One of his guards reached for his belt. Aldrich laughed. It came out of him like something surprised, a real sound, unguarded, with no performance in it. His sister's eyebrows rose so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. He bought every jar on Mira's table. He paid 3 times the asking price without blinking. He smiled at her once more before he left, and the smile was different from the entrance, quieter, with something wondering in it. That evening, his rider came to her cottage door. The letter explained, in formal language, that the Alpha King had identified his fated mate at the winter solstice market. The bond had been confirmed by his wolf. The crown ceremony would take place at the next full moon, at Voris Keep. Her attendance was respectfully requested. Her acceptance was assumed. Mira folded the letter neatly along its original crease. She put it in the drawer, where she kept things she did not know what to do with yet. She went to bed. 3 weeks later, she arrived at Voris Keep in her best dress. 300 people filled the great hall. Candles burned in iron brackets along every wall. The elder who performed the ceremony had a beard that reached his chest, and the slow, certain voice of a man who had never been rushed in his life. The circlet of mountain iron rested on a velvet pillow at the altar, small and dark and heavy-looking. Aldrich stood at the front of the hall in his formal clothes, and watched Mira walk toward him, with an expression that was trying to be calm and not quite managing it. She walked all the way to the altar. She stood across from him. She looked at the circlet. She looked at him. The elder asked the ritual question. Did she accept the bond, the crown, and the king? Mira said, no. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that had a physical weight. Someone near the back of the hall dropped something small, and the sound of it hitting the stone floor was very loud. She explained herself, not defensively, not cruelly. Plainly, the way she explained things to customers who needed a remedy they had not tried before. She said she did not know this man. She said that a wolf recognizing something was not the same as 2 people choosing each other. She said she would not put on a crown handed to her by a stranger, no matter how many mountains he governed. She said she genuinely wished him well. She meant it. Then she turned and walked back down the length of the hall, through the silent crowd, and out the great wooden doors into the dark. Behind her, she heard nothing for a long moment. Then she heard, very softly, the sound of 4 paws on stone. She did not look back. The wolf followed her out of the keep, across the courtyard, through the gate, and onto the mountain road. It kept 40 feet behind her, not close enough to crowd her, not far enough to lose her. The snow had started. Light, dry flakes that caught the light from the keep's windows and then disappeared into the dark. Mira's shoes were not built for snow. She knew this. She walked anyway. After about a quarter mile, she stopped. The wolf stopped. She turned around. He was large, as wolves went, dark gray, almost black in the low light, with yellow eyes that held an expression she did not have words for yet. He was sitting in the snow with his paws together, looking at her, the way someone looks when they have many things to say, and know this is not the moment to say any of them. "Go home," she said. He did not move. "I mean it." He sat in the snow and continued looking at her with those yellow eyes. Mira turned back around and walked the remaining 2.5 miles to her mother's cottage. The wolf stayed 40 feet behind her the entire way. By the time she reached her door, her shoes were soaked through, her feet were numb, and the wolf was covered in a thin crust of snow that made him look slightly ridiculous. She went inside. He did not follow her in. She watched from the window as he curled up in the snow at the edge of her yard, tucked his nose under his tail, and went still. In the morning, he was gone. But the following evening, when she went out to collect firewood from the shed, she caught a glimpse of movement at the tree line, dark gray, almost black. It became the pattern. She would go about her days, collecting roots along the lower trails, carrying baskets to the village, sitting on the cold stone wall behind the cottage to watch the light change on the eastern peaks, and he would be somewhere nearby, always at a distance, never demanding anything, never making himself a nuisance, just present, the way a mountain is present. She started to recognize his particular way of sitting in snow. She did not tell her mother. She did not need to. Her mother had lived on these mountains for 50 years and missed very little. "He is still coming?" her mother asked one morning, without looking up from her work. "To the tree line," Mira said. "Yes." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "What does he want?" "I don't know yet," Mira said, "but he hasn't asked for anything." The mountain passes froze solid by the end of the month. The trails became treacherous. The village settled into its winter habits. Early dark, low fires, long evenings. Mira made her remedies, kept her accounts, and walked her mountains when the weather allowed. The wolf was always somewhere in the distance. The storm that changed everything arrived without much warning on a Thursday. It came from the north, which meant it was serious, and it closed the main road in under 4 hours. By nightfall, the snow was so thick that the trees disappeared. Mira's mother went to bed with a cough that evening. By midnight, the cough had turned into something that wasn't a cough anymore. By the 3rd hour of the morning, her mother's breathing had gone shallow and rough, and Mira had used every remedy she knew, and some she wasn't sure about, and the village healer was on the wrong side of the pass, and might as well have been on the wrong side of the world. She was sitting at her mother's bedside in the dark, holding her mother's hand and keeping her face very still, when she heard a sound at the cottage door. One quiet scratch, deliberate, asking, not demanding. She opened the door. Aldrich stood there in human form, covered in snow, soaked to the skin, with the particular look of a man who has been moving hard through rough terrain for a very long time and has not stopped to think about himself once. Behind him, further up the road, she could see the village healer making her way carefully through the snowdrift, a lamp in one hand and her bag in the other. "I found another way," Aldrich said, "through the eastern ridge. It took most of the night. May I come in out of the cold?" She stepped back from the door. The healer arrived. She worked quickly and well, Mira's mother's breathing steadied by dawn. Aldrich sat in the corner of the kitchen and did not take up more space than he needed to. He accepted a blanket. He accepted tea. He did not speak unless spoken to. When Mira came out of her mother's room after the crisis had passed and sat down heavily at the kitchen table, he pushed the second cup of tea toward her without a word. After a while, she asked him why. "Why what?" he said. "All of it. The mountains. The following. Why not simply choose someone else? There must be others." He was quiet for a moment. He turned his cup in his hands. "My wolf has better judgment than I do," he said finally. "It always has. I have spent most of my life giving orders and not noticing things. My wolf notices everything." He paused. I am trying to learn from it. She looked at him across the table. What is it trying to teach you? That the difference between wanting something and deserving it, he said, is everything. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in recent memory. She did not tell him this, but she thought about it for a long time after he left that morning. Walking back through the snow toward wherever he had come from, hands in his pockets, the wolf shape of him in the gray dawn light before he disappeared around the bend in the road. Winter turned toward spring the way it always did in the mountains, reluctantly, in stages, with setbacks. The snow on the road softened and then hardened again, and then softened for good. The passes cleared from east to west. The first green things appeared on the south-facing slopes. Aldrich came to the cottage one morning in early spring and knocked on the actual door like a person. Mira's mother, who was fully recovered and entirely unsurprised, let him in and called for Mira, and then found reasons to be elsewhere in the house. They walked that morning, down the lower trail, through the birch trees that were just beginning to show green, along the edge of the stream that was running fast with snowmelt. He told her about the work of managing 7 packs, the disputes, the boundaries, the weight of decisions that affected hundreds of families. She told him about the names she had given to different sections of the mountain trail, the quiet part, the place where the light comes through sideways, the rock that looks like a worried dog. He listened with complete attention, as if the names of the trail sections were as important as anything he had heard in council. They did this again the following week. And the week after that, his sister Senna appeared one morning without warning, sat herself down on the porch steps, looked at her brother, who was wearing a plain shirt and had his sleeves rolled up, and was listening to Mira describe the best way to prepare elder root, and said, with great feeling, that this was the most she had liked him in 20 years. Spring deepened. The eastern peaks shed their white. The air warmed enough that mornings on the porch became possible again. One morning, sitting on the cold stone wall at the back of the cottage, watching the last of the snow disappear from the high ridgeline, Aldrich turned to Mira and said her name. Just her name. Not a title, not an offer. Just Mira. She looked at him. I am not asking you for anything you do not want to give, he said. I am not asking you to wear anything, or stand anywhere, or say anything, for 300 people. I am asking whether you would like to keep walking these mountains with me, whether you would like to be my person and let me be yours. Nothing formal, nothing assigned, just that. She was quiet for a long moment. The wind came up the slope below them, carrying the smell of wet stone and new grass. She took his hand. She did not say yes to a crown. She said yes to a man who had learned to follow her home through the snow without asking her to slow down. There was a difference, and he already knew it. 6 months later, Mira stood again at the altar in Voris Keep. Same hall, same candles, same elder with the chest-length beard, but this time it was Mira who reached out and lifted the circlet of mountain iron from the velvet pillow herself, with both hands, and placed it on her own head. She looked out at the 300 people watching her. I accept this, she said, because I choose it, not because it was decided for me. The great hall was very quiet for a moment. Then it was not quiet at all. The old law, as it turned out, had always allowed for this. The elder found the clause in the original text that evening, paragraph 12, subparagraph 3, the right of the chosen to crown themselves, if they wished. No one had ever thought to try it before. Years later, when children in the villages asked about the Alpha Queen, how she had come to her crown, what kind of woman she was, the answer was always the same. She had refused the crown the first time it was offered. She had walked home alone through the snow with the king's wolf at her heels, and made him earn the right to be worth following back to. She had made her choice in her own time, on her own terms, and she had placed the crown on her own head when she was ready. And Aldrich, people always added, had never once complained about the frozen shoes.